My own daughter pushed us off a cliff, and as I lay on the ground, bones broken and blood streaming down my face, I heard my husband whisper, "Don't move, Anna. Pretend you're dead." But the worst part wasn't the impact of the 30-meter fall. That's when the secret our daughter had kept for 2 decades was revealed. But before continuing, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and leave a comment. Where are you watching this video from? We love to hear the depths of our stories. I never imagined that at 58, I'd be pretending to be dead to escape my own children. For 35 years, I built what I believed to be a perfect family. Our mornings began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of the Oaxaca mountains in the distance. I taught high school literature, while Jorge created handmade furniture in his carpentry shop. We had 2 children, Ricardo, our firstborn, charismatic and protective, and Alejandra, 5 years younger, always reserved and observant. On Sundays, we all gathered around the table Jorge had carved with his own hands. Ricardo talked animatedly about his plans to become an architect, while Alejandra played with her food, avoiding eye contact. At night, Jorge and I walked along the Cancun beach, planning our retirement, dreaming of the trips we would take when our children had gone their own way. I was happy, or at least I thought I was. Everything changed one September night exactly 20 years ago. Ricardo didn't return home after going out with friends. We waited until dawn, frantically calling everyone we knew. Alejandra stayed in her room, saying she was studying for exams, but there was something odd about her behavior that I couldn't decipher at the time. Jorge went out with the neighbors to search for Ricardo. At dawn, they found his body at the bottom of a ravine near Cancun Beach. The police concluded it was an accident, that he probably slipped in the dark. I never questioned that version. How could I imagine the truth? The funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore the same black dress I wore to my mother's funeral. Alejandra remained strangely calm as I collapsed in tears. Jorge held me tightly when my legs buckled. Now I understand why he seemed to carry an even heavier weight than the loss of our son. After Ricardo's death, Alejandra changed completely. She became more attentive and affectionate, helping with household chores and spending more time with us. I interpreted this as her way of coping with grief, of filling the void left by her brother. What a cruel mistake. The years passed. Alejandra married Manuel, a quiet man from a neighboring town, Puebla. They had 2 beautiful children. I finally felt like life was giving us a second chance. Manuel called me Mom, and Alejandra had followed in her father's footsteps, opening her own artisanal furniture workshop. Our family seemed finally rebuilt. Everything seemed perfect again. But now, lying at the bottom of this ravine with broken ribs and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, I understand that all that happiness was a carefully orchestrated lie. The first signs that something was wrong began about 4 months ago, when Jorge and I decided to update our will. Between our beachfront house, the land I inherited from my parents, and our savings, we had approximately 1.8 million Mexican pesos to leave as an inheritance. It was Alejandra who suggested we visit the lawyer. Mom and Dad are already over 55. It's important to have everything organized. He said it with that smile that now seems sinister to me. Manuela felt at his side, squeezing my hand with fingers that would later push me to my death. "We love you so much, and we want to make sure you're protected," he added in his gentle voice. The lawyer, the doctor, Javier, a gentleman we'd known for years, explained our options. We could create a trust, divide the inheritance among the grandchildren, or make a traditional will. Alejandra insisted on being named along with Manuel as our sole heir. "We'll take care of the fair distribution for the children," she argued. "Besides, they'll need us when they get older. It's better that we have access to the resources to care for them properly." Something in his tone made me uncomfortable, but Jorge seemed convinced. My husband, who was always more trusting than I was, accepted the proposal without much resistance. I had my doubts, especially because I remembered how Ricardo always talked about helping us financially in our old age. But Ricardo was gone, and Alejandra was our only surviving child. We signed the documents one Thursday afternoon. Manuel was dressed in an impeccable suit and hugged me for a long time after the signing. "We are now officially a family united forever," he whispered in my ear. His words sent an inexplicable chill through me. That night, as I was preparing dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling of having made a terrible mistake. The following weeks were strange. Alejandra and Manuel began visiting us more frequently, but their visits had a different tone. They didn't just come to spend time with us. They always brought suggestions about how we should improve the house, what investments to make, or what life insurance to buy. "Mom, you should think about selling this big house and moving to a smaller place," Alejandra said, examining our furniture with a calculating eye. "We could help you find a comfortable apartment in downtown Monterrey." But I loved our house. Every corner held a precious memory of our 35 years together. The kitchen where I prepared thousands of meals, the workshop where Jorge created his masterpieces, the patio where our children and grandchildren played. I couldn't imagine my life anywhere else. When I expressed this, I saw a flash of irritation in Alejandra's eyes that chilled me to the bone. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," he said, in a tone he'd never used with me. "This house is too big for two people your age. If you fall down the stairs or something happens, we won't be able to get there in time to help." Manuela felt strongly about it. Besides, the maintenance must cost a fortune. It would be much smarter to sell now while the real estate market is booming. Jorge began to consider her arguments, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the pressure. One night after another of those tense conversations, I asked Jorge if he thought it was strange that Alejandra was suddenly so interested in our financial affairs. "Ana, she only cares about us," he replied while brushing his teeth. "Maybe we should consider your suggestions. We're not as young as we used to be." But I saw something in his eyes, a shadow of doubt he didn't want to acknowledge. Now I know that Jorge already had his suspicions, that he was already beginning to connect the dots I didn't even know existed. Things got worse when Alejandra suggested we give him power of attorney over our finances. "It's just a precaution," she explained, while Manuel made tea in our kitchen, as if he already owned the place. "If one of you falls ill or has a health problem, we can manage your affairs without legal complications." The way he said it so matter-of-factly almost convinced me, but there was something about his insistence that made me nervous. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Jorge's breathing beside me, trying to understand why I felt so restless. The next day, I decided to call my sister Sophia for advice. Sophia was always more perceptive than I was, more distrustful of people's intentions. When I told her about Alejandra's pressure, she was silent for a long moment. Ana finally said, "Don't you find it strange that Alejandra is so eager to control your money? I mean, she has her own business." "He's fine financially. Why would he need so much control over your finances?" His words hit me like a slap in the face. She was right. Alejandra never showed financial problems. She never borrowed money. She never gave any indication of needing our financial help. That afternoon, when Alejandra showed up for another one of their conversations about our future, I decided to confront her directly. "Daughter," I started while we were sitting in the Porsche, "why is it so important to you to have control over our financial affairs? Your father and I are still lucid." His reaction was immediate and revealing. His face hardened, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of someone else. Something cold and calculating I'd never noticed before. "Mom, it's not about control," he replied in a tense voice. It's about love, care, and family responsibility. But the way she uttered family responsibility sounded more like a threat than an expression of affection. Manuel, who had remained silent until then, intervened in his calm but firm voice. Ana, we only want the best for you. It's painful to watch them worry about things we could easily solve. That night, after they left, Jorge and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was being paranoid, looking for problems where none existed. I insisted that something wasn't right, that our daughter's behavior had changed too much. Jorge, I said as we washed the dishes, do you remember what Alejandra was like before Ricardo died? She was different, more distant, more. I can't explain it, but there was something about her that scared me. My husband stopped drying the plate he was holding and stared at me. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Recognition. Ana, he said in a very low voice, there are things about Ricardo's death I never told you. My heart started beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Jorge's words hit me like a bolt of lightning. What about Ricardo's death? I asked, my voice shaking. Jorge sat heavily on one of the kitchen chairs, the same table where we shared thousands of family meals, where Ricardo used to do his homework, and where Alejandra always remained silent. He ran his hands over his face, as if trying to erase memories that had tormented him for 20 years. The night Ricardo died began with a muffled voice. Alejandra wasn't in her room studying, as she told us. I saw her leave the house around 8. I followed her because something about her attitude worried me. She was acting very strange those days, more aggressive, more resentful. My husband stopped staring at his hands, as if the terrible truth he had kept hidden for so long were written on them. I saw them arguing near the ravine. Ana, I heard them yelling horrible things at each other. My world started spinning. What were you arguing about? I whispered, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer anymore. Jorge looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. Tears he didn't even shed at our oldest son's funeral. About money. Ana Alejandra was furious because Ricardo was the oldest. Because according to my family's traditions, he would inherit most of our assets. But there was something else, something about some money Ricardo had discovered. What money? I asked, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. Jorge sighed deeply before continuing. Days before he died, Ricardo came to talk to me at the workshop. He had discovered that Alejandra was stealing money from our savings, small amounts at first, but then larger sums. Ricardo had proof. He'd been investigating for months. My mind refused to process what I was hearing. My daughter, the one who had been so attentive after Ricardo's death, the one who helped us and cared for us, had been stealing from us since before her brother died. Why didn't you ever tell me? I rebuked Jorge, feeling the betrayal multiply. Because when I got to the ravine that night, it was already too late, she replied in a choked voice. I saw Alejandra standing next to Ricardo's body. Our daughter was shaking, crying, and repeating over and over again. It was an accident! It was an accident! She looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me to help her. Dad, she said. Ricardo slipped as he tried to grab me. I defended myself, and he lost his balance. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. But you believed him, I murmured, even though I already knew the answer. Jorge nodded slowly, his expression filled with guilt that had plagued him for decades. It was my daughter, Ana. My daughter was asking me for help, and Ricardo was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it really was an accident, that Alejandra had learned her lesson, that she would become a better person after this. And the stolen money? I asked, needing to know every detail of this nightmare. Never, she replied. In fact, she continued taking small amounts, which I pretended not to notice, because confronting her would mean admitting I covered up a murder. I became his accomplice, Anna. Every time I remained silent, every time I pretended not to see the bank accounts dwindling, I became more complicit. The terrible reality began to take shape in my mind. That's why she's so interested in controlling our finances now, I murmured. It's not because she cares about us, it's because she wants to finish what she started 20 years ago. Jorge nodded gravely. And there's something else, Anna? Something I discovered a couple of weeks ago. What else could there be? I asked, feeling like my heart couldn't bear any more revelations. Jorge went to his desk and took out some papers he had hidden under other documents. I've been discreetly investigating Alejandra's finances. Her workshop isn't doing as well as she wants us to believe. In fact, it's on the verge of bankruptcy. She owes more than 400,000 Mexican pesos to various banks and suppliers. The papers shook in my hands as I read the numbers. Alejandra wasn't the successful businesswoman she pretended to be. He was a desperate man who had lived off lies and stolen money for decades. Does Manuel know about all this? I asked, remembering his calm smile and warm hugs. I'm sure he does, Jorge replied. I noticed how he steers conversations about our money, how he asks specific questions about our savings, the value of our house, our insurance policies. These aren't innocent questions, Anna. These are questions from someone calculating exactly how much our death is worth. That phrase chilled me to the bone. Our death, I repeated in a whisper. It was the first time I considered that Alejandra might want to physically harm us. Until that moment, I thought she just wanted to rob us or deceive us. But if she had caused the death of her own brother for money, what would stop her from killing her parents for the same reason? Jorge, I said, grabbing her hands. We have to go to the police. We have to tell them the truth about Ricardo and what's happening now. But my husband shook his head with a helpless look that broke my heart. What evidence do you have, Anna? I'm an accomplice to covering up a murder. If I speak out now, I'll go to jail too. And besides, who's going to believe a 60-year-old man who kept this secret for 20 years? She was right. So we just hope he kills us like he did Ricardo. We're going to be very careful, Jorge said, trying to sound more confident than he actually was. We're going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence to... But his words were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. It was Alejandra. Hi, Mom, she said in that sweet voice that now sounded sinister to me. Manuel and I have been thinking, and we think it would be lovely to celebrate your 35th wedding anniversary with something special. How about we take you to that viewpoint in the Sierra Madre Oriental next weekend? We could go for a family hike, take pictures, and have a perfect day together. My blood ran cold. I looked at Jorge, who had overheard the conversation, and had the same look of terror on his face. That's a very sweet idea, honey, I managed to answer with a shaky voice. But let us think about it, and we'll call you back tomorrow. After hanging up, Jorge and I looked at each other in silence, knowing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. The lookout, I murmured, is going to take us to the lookout to kill us and make it look like an accident. Jorge nodded gravely. That night, we didn't sleep a minute cuddled in our bed, planning how we could save ourselves from our own daughter. The following days were a nightmare of terror and dissimulation. Jorge and I had to act as if nothing had happened when Alejandra and Manuel came to visit us, smiling when they talked about the trip to the lookout, nodding when they excitedly told us they would be spending time with us. But inside, every fiber of my being screamed with fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of those responsible for my oldest son's death, and that they were now planning to do the same to me and my husband. Manuel arrived Thursday afternoon with a new backpack and that calm smile that now resembled the mask of a sociopath. "Ah, Anna, darling," he said, embracing me with those arms that would soon push me to my death. I bought some supplies for our adventure at the lookout. Water fruit sandwiches, everything we'd need for the picnic. He showed me the contents of the backpack, like I was an excited child, but all I could think about was how each of those items could be used to cover up our murder. "I also brought my new camera," he added, showing off an expensive digital camera. "I want to capture every moment of this special day. These will be photos we'll keep forever." The irony of his words made me nauseous. The only photo he'd take would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some ravine if anyone ever found us. Alejandra appeared carrying brand new hiking gear. "Dad," he told Jorge with feigned enthusiasm, "I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike: ropes, flashlights, a first aid kit." Every word out of his mouth sounded like a cruel mockery. Security detail to plan our murders. The perversity of the situation made me dizzy. "Isn't it a little dangerous for people our age?" I asked, trying to sound casual while looking for any excuse to cancel the trip. Alejandra caressed my cheek with that false tenderness that made my stomach churn. "That's why we chose a very easy and safe trail," she assured me. "It's a hike even children can do. Also, Manuel and I will be there to take care of you at all times." Yes, they would be there to take care of us until the exact moment they decided to push us off a cliff. That night, when they finally left Jorge, and I sat on our porch shivering not only from the cold of the night, but from the absolute terror we had contained for hours. "We can't go," I said, grabbing his hands. "Let's make up some excuse." "If we don't go," Jorge replied in a deep voice, "they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something that seems even more accidental, like a house fire or a break-in gone wrong. At least on the lookout, we know what they're going to try." His words made terrible sense, but they didn't comfort me in the slightest. "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, desperate for some solution that would save our lives. Jorge thought for a few minutes before answering. "Let's go, but we'll be prepared. I'm going to hide my cell phone and set it to record everything that happens. If we make it through, we'll have proof. And if we don't," his voice cracked, "at least someone will know the truth." On Friday night, we could barely touch our dinner. We knew it might be our last meal together in our home in that kitchen where we had shared so many happy moments when we were a real family. Jorge reviewed his will once more, making sure that if anything happened to us, at least Alejandra wouldn't get everything without any record of our suspicions. I wrote a letter. He confessed, showing me a sealed envelope. "It's addressed to your sister Sophia." In it, she explained everything we know about Ricardo's death and what we believe Alejandra plans to do to us. I hid it in the bank's safe deposit box. If we don't come back from this trip, at least she'll know where to look for the truth. That night, we went to bed cuddling, whispering words of love that might be our last. "If anything happens to me," Jorge said, "I want you to know that these 35 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite everything, despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than life itself." I wept silently, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her body, the scent of her skin. Saturday dawned with a blue sky that seemed to mock our situation. Alejandra arrived early, whistling a cheerful tune that chilled my blood. "Good morning, lovebirds," she called from the front door. "Ready for your big adventure?" Manuel appeared behind her, beaming as if it were the happiest day of his life. Except this was a brush with death. Over breakfast, which we barely managed to eat, Alejandra explained the route we would take in detail. "It's a beautiful trail," she said, spreading a map on the table. "It takes you to a viewing point where you can see the entire Puerto Vallarta Bay. They say the view is spectacular." His eyes shone with a demonic enthusiasm. Of course the views would be spectacular. They would be the last we'd ever see. "The trail has some steep sections," Manuel added, as if he were giving us useful tourist information. "But nothing that experienced hikers like yourselves can't handle." His comment about our supposed hiking skills sounded like a cruel joke. We were two exaggerated hikers who barely walked on the beach once in a while. As we loaded the car, I saw Alejandra meticulously checking her backpack, making sure she had everything she needed for her plan. I saw ropes, a small shovel, and something that looked like a flare. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing at the flare. "For safety," he replied without hesitation. "If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal." Of course, they would send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff so our bodies could be found and confirmed as a tragic accident during a family hike. Everything was calculated. Every detail had been planned to make our murders seem perfectly natural. The car ride to the Sierra Madre Oriental lasted almost 3 hours, which seemed like an eternity. Manuel put on some upbeat music and sang along as if we were really going on a fun family outing. Alejandra drove carefully, obeying all speed limits and stopping at every stop sign. She didn't want to risk an accident that would ruin her perfect plans. During the ride, Jorge discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. Everything that happened from that moment on would be recorded. If we managed to survive, we would have proof. If not, at least the truth wouldn't die with us. When we finally reached the trailhead, my heart was beating so hard, I thought it would burst out of my chest. The place was beautiful with tall trees and the sound of a waterfall in the distance. But for me, it had become the stage for my own execution. Alejandra and Manuel took their backpacks out of the car, smiling and joking, as if it were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure?" Alejandra asked. And for the first time in 20 years, I saw the same cold gleam in his eyes that must have been there the night Ricardo died. The trail started relatively easy, winding through leafy trees and moss-covered rocks. Manuel walked ahead of us, constantly taking photos and commenting on the beauty of the landscape. "Look at those wildflowers," he exclaimed, pointing to bushes filled with purple blossoms. "And that rock formation incredible." His performance was perfect, that of a loving son-in-law enjoying a special day with his in-laws. Alejandra walked behind us supposedly to make sure we didn't fall behind, but I could feel her eyes on our backs like daggers. Every time I turned around to look at her, she smiled at me with that smile she'd perfected over 20 years of lying. "How are Mom and Dad?" I asked with fake concern. "Do you need to stop and rest?" After an hour of walking, we started up a steeper part of the trail. My legs were already heavy, and Jorge was breathing heavily. We weren't used to this kind of exercise, and our murderous children knew it perfectly well. They had chosen a route that would exhaust us physically, leaving us vulnerable when the time came to execute the plan. "We're almost at the lookout," Manuel announced enthusiastically. Although according to the map I'd seen at home, we still had at least another half-hour of walking left, their lie confirmed that they had no intention of reaching the official lookout point. The place where they planned to kill us must be much closer. Throughout the hike, I tried to memorize every detail of the trail, every tree, every rock that could serve as a reference if I managed to survive, and I needed to explain to the police exactly where everything had happened. Jorge did the same, and we occasionally exchanged glances filled with terror and determination. We knew we were walking to our deaths, but we also knew it was our only chance to get the evidence we needed. "Look at that!" Alejandra suddenly shouted, pointing at a rock formation that stood out to our right. "That cliff has an incredible view. Let's go up there to take some special photos." My blood ran cold. There it was, the spot they'd chosen for our murder. The cliff rose about 30 meters above the main trail, accessible by a side road that looked much more dangerous than the one we were following. The rocks were loose, there were fewer trees to grab onto in case we tripped, and from the top, you could see a precipice dropping into a deep ravine filled with sharp rocks. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, trying to sound casual. "That trail seems pretty dangerous for people our age." But Manuel had already started walking toward the fork, carrying his backpack full of safety equipment that I knew he wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Ana," he said in that persuasive voice he used when he wanted to convince me of something. "It'll only take a few minutes. Besides, Alejandra's right. The photos from up there will be spectacular." The way he said spectacular made me shiver. They would be spectacular for whoever saw them later as evidence of our accident. Jorge squeezed my hand discreetly, reminding me that his phone was recording everything. We had to keep going. We had to go all the way to get the evidence we needed. If we refused now, they'd simply find another opportunity, another place, another excuse to kill us. The climb up the cliff was exhausting. Loose rocks slid beneath our feet, and more than once, I almost fell. But the scariest thing was realizing how perfect this place was for a murder. If someone accidentally tripped and fell from the top, there would be no way to survive. And most importantly, there would be no witnesses. "We're almost there!" Alejandra shouted from above, where she had already arrived with the agility of someone who had carefully planned this route. Manuel followed her, then helped Jorge and me complete the last few meters of the climb. His hands on my arms felt like the claws of a predator. The viewpoint was truly spectacular. From there, we could see the entire valley, the mountains in the distance, and the sea shimmering on the horizon. Under any other circumstances, it would have been a wonderful time to share with the family. But knowing what I knew, the place felt like the perfect setting for a nightmare. "Come here for the photos," Manuel shouted, positioning himself near the edge of the cliff. "I want the valley in the background." Jorge and I approached slowly each step, bringing us closer to our final destination. I could see Alejandra strategically positioning herself behind us, calculating angles, measuring distances. "Perfect," Manuel exclaimed, raising his camera. "Now hug each other and smile." Jorge and I hugged probably for the last time as he took photo after photo. Each flash of the camera felt like a bolt of lightning announcing the storm that was about to arrive. "Take another one," Alejandra suggested, moving closer to us. "But this time, stand a little further back so the landscape fits better in the frame." One step back meant standing right on the edge of the precipice. Jorge and I exchanged a look. The moment had arrived. We moved back as ordered, feeling the solid ground disappear beneath our feet, leaving only the emptiness of the abyss behind us. Manuel raised his camera once more, but this time I saw something different in his eyes. There was no need to pretend anymore. The mask had fallen off. "Smile," he said in a voice that was no longer gentle. "This will be your last photo." At that moment, Alejandra launched herself toward us, arms outstretched. The plan was simple: push us backward so we fell into the void, take some photos of the crash, and then climb down to discover our broken bodies. But Jorge had been preparing for this moment. At the last second, he managed to grab Alejandra's wrist and pull her forward. If we're going to die, you're coming with us, he shouted with a fury I'd never seen in him before. For a moment, the four of us were teetering on the edge of the cliff, clutching each other in a macabre dance between life and death. Manuel screamed and tried to help Alejandra, but the weight of all of us was too much. I felt the ground give way beneath my feet. I felt gravity begin to win the battle. And then, the four of us fell together, locked in a death grip, screaming, as the air whistled around us and the rocky ground closed in at breakneck speed. In those seconds that lasted an eternity, I thought about Ricardo, about how he must have felt when Alejandra pushed him into the ravine 20 years ago. I imagined his terror, his confusion, his betrayal, when he realized his own sister had condemned him to death. The impact was brutal. I heard the horrible sound of bones breaking the sound of my own body smashing against the rocks. The pain was indescribable, but even more terrible was the taste of blood in my mouth and the certainty that this time Alejandra had won. This time there would be no witnesses to tell the truth. But then I heard Jorge's voice, faint but clear. "Ana, don't move, pretend you're dead." And I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense, I thought I was going to go crazy. Every fiber of my body screamed in agony. I felt blood running down my face and something warm and sticky soaking my clothes. But Jorge's voice echoed in my ears like a divine command. "Pretend you're dead." With a willpower I didn't know I possessed, I remained completely still, even controlling my breathing so that it was imperceptible. A few feet away, I could hear Alejandra and Manuel's moans of pain. They had also survived the fall, but from the sounds they made, they seemed to be in worse condition than us. "Manuel," I heard my daughter's broken voice. "Are you okay?" Her concern for her husband turned my stomach. This woman who had caused the death of her own brother and tried to kill us was still capable of feeling love for someone. "I think I broke my leg," Manuel groaned. "It hurts so much, Alejandra." And the old folks." The contemptuous way he referred to us confirmed what I already knew. We were never family to him. We were just obstacles on the way to our money. I heard movement as if Alejandra were crawling in our direction. My heart was beating so fast I was afraid she could hear it. "They're dead," she announced after a few minutes that felt like hours. "Both of their eyes are open, but they're not breathing." Their lie filled me with a strange hope. If I thought we were dead, maybe we'd have a chance. "Perfect," Manuel whispered with a satisfaction that chilled my blood. "It worked exactly as we planned." "Well, except for the part where we fell for it too," Alejandra replied with a bitter laugh. "At least we won't have to pretend we love them anymore." In the next few minutes, which seemed like an eternity, Alejandra and Manuel discussed their situation. They were both hurt, but able to move. The plan now was to crawl until they found a place where they could call for help, and then tell the story of how they had miraculously survived a tragic accident that had killed their poor parents. "Remember the story," Alejandra told Manuel. "We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He stumbled, and trying to catch himself, he pulled Mom down with him. We tried to help, but we fell too. It's important that our stories match." "I know," Manuel replied. "We've practiced it 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us. We lost our beloved in-laws in a horrible accident. His performance was so convincing that if I hadn't lived the truth, I would have believed every word." Gradually, their voices faded as they crawled toward what they hoped was salvation. When silence finally fell, Jorge whispered my name so quietly I could barely hear it. Anna, are you okay? I replied in the same whisper, confirming that she was alive but terribly injured. My right leg is broken, he told me, his voice thick with pain. And I think I have some broken ribs. And you? I took a mental inventory of my body. I felt a sharp pain in my left arm. My head was throbbing, like someone was hitting it with a hammer. And there was definitely something wrong with my shoulder. But I was alive, and that was more than I'd expected. We're bad, but we're alive, I whispered. The phone's recording, but there's no signal down here. That was the most terrifying part of our situation. We were alive, but trapped at the bottom of a ravine, injured, and with no way to communicate with the outside world. If no one came looking for us, we would slowly die there, of thirst, hunger, or our wounds. Jorge, I whispered. Before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything that really happened the night Ricardo died. My husband sighed deeply, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for 20 years. That evening began with a trembling voice. Ricardo came to find me in the workshop. He was furious. He had papers in his hands, bank statements. He showed me evidence that Alejandra had been stealing money from our accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Ricardo had been investigating because he'd noticed discrepancies in our savings. Physical pain mingled with emotional pain as I heard the truth that had been hidden for decades. Ricardo wanted to confront Alejandra that same night, Jorge continued. I tried to calm him down, convince him to wait until the next day, but he was determined. He said he couldn't sleep knowing his younger sister was stealing from us. And you followed him? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I followed him because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew Ricardo's temper when he got angry, and I'd also noticed something strange about Alejandra lately. A coldness that sent shivers down my spine. When I got to the ravine, Jorge continued, I found them shouting at each other. Ricardo had the papers in his hand, waving them in Alejandra's face. You're a thief, he yelled at her. You're stealing from our own parents. Alejandra denied everything. She said Ricardo was crazy, that he was making things up. My heart raced as I imagined the scene. My two sons facing off in the dark, one accusing the other of betrayal. What happened next, I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know. Jorge paused for a long moment before continuing. Ricardo told him that if he didn't return the money and confess everything, he would tell us the truth himself. Alejandra was furious. She shouted that Ricardo had always been the favorite, that everything had always been easy, that it was time for things to change. And then Jorge's voice broke. Alejandra pushed Ricardo. It wasn't an accident. She pushed him with all her might, deliberately. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with the blood from my wounds. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? I asked, feeling a mixture of rage and despair. Jorge sighed deeply. Because when I got to where Alejandra was, she was crying, trembling, telling me over and over that it had been an accident, that she hadn't meant to do it. He begged me not to tell you anything, that he couldn't lose you too. But you knew it was a lie. I murmured, feeling the weight of betrayal deepen. Yes. But she was my daughter Anna, my only surviving child. How could I turn her over to the police? How could I destroy what remained of our family? Her justification hurt as much as my physical injuries. And the stolen money, I continued. Alejandra promised she would pay it back little by little. She swore it had been a bad decision, that she was desperate, that it would never happen again. But she never returned a single cent. In fact, he continued stealing, and I remained silent because every day that passed, I became more complicit in his crime. At that moment, we heard voices in the distance. Alejandra and Manuel had managed to find help. Soon the rescue teams would be here, and our murderous children would play the role of their lives, the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. The voices grew ever closer, accompanied by the sound of helicopters circling overhead. The rescue team had arrived, and with them came the most crucial moment of our lives. Jorge and I had a decision to make in a matter of minutes. Should we continue pretending to be dead until we found the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth, or risk being rescued along with our killers? Ana. Jorge whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything that happened up there. We have Manuel's confession about the plan. We have Alejandra admitting that we're obstacles. We have everything. But if they find us alive now, they can destroy the evidence before we can turn it over to the authorities. She was right. If Alejandra and Manuel realized we had survived and heard their confessions, they would find a way to silence us forever. This time, it wouldn't be an accident. It would be something much more direct and definitive. We had to wait for the perfect moment. "Are they down here?" Alejandra's voice shouted from above. "My parents, please hurry." Her performance was perfect. Her voice cracked with pain and despair. If I didn't know the truth, I would have thought she was a daughter devastated by the loss of her parents. "Ma'am, stay calm," responded an authoritative voice that must have belonged to the rescue team leader. "We're going down to assess them." "Can you and your husband move?" I heard the sound of ropes and equipment being prepared for the descent. Manuel had perfected his role as the grieving son-in-law. "I can't believe this happened," he sobbed. "We were taking pictures so happy. Everything happened so fast. A rock came loose and they fell." Every word was a stab in my heart, because I knew he would repeat those same lies to the police, the media, anyone who would hear his version of events. The first responders began to descend. I could hear their voices getting closer, the sound of boots against rock, the clinking of equipment. Jorge discreetly squeezed my hand, reminding me that we had to keep up the act, no matter what happened. "They're here!" one of the rescuers shouted when he found us. "We have 2 people at the bottom of the ravine." He approached us and began examining us. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing so shallow, it was almost imperceptible. I felt his hands searching for a pulse on my neck, his ear near my mouth, trying to detect breathing. "This one still has a weak pulse," he announced, referring to Jorge. "The woman, I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately." My heart raced. The plan was working. They would believe Jorge was on the verge of death but still alive, while I would be close enough to death to not pose an immediate threat. In the next few minutes, which felt like hours, the paramedics worked on us. I felt them put an oxygen mask on me, check my wounds, and strap me onto a stretcher. The whole time I had to fight every instinct in my body that screamed at me to open my eyes, to ask for help, to stop pretending. "The man is stable, but in critical condition." I heard one of the paramedics report on the radio. "The woman is in very serious condition with a barely perceptible pulse. We need to transport them to the hospital immediately." Perfect. They'd take us to the hospital, where we'd have the opportunity to speak with the authorities without Alejandra and Manuel being able to silence us. During the stretcher loading, I could hear Alejandra's sobs and the words of comfort the rescuers offered her and Manuel. "You were so brave to survive this," someone told her. "It's a miracle you're even relatively okay." If only they knew the true miracle was that Jorge and I were alive to tell the truth. In the medical helicopter, as we flew to the hospital, I could feel Jorge's presence on the stretcher beside me. The paramedics were focused on keeping him stable, and from their conversations, I understood he was in critical condition. His injuries were more serious than mine, and for one terrible moment I feared he might die before we had a chance to reveal the truth. "Ma'am," I heard one of the paramedics say to me, "if you can hear me, hold on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes." Her voice was kind, filled with genuine compassion that contrasted dramatically with the falsehood I'd been hearing from my own family. When we arrived at the hospital in Mexico City, chaos erupted. Doctors and nurses ran around shouting medical orders I didn't understand. I was taken directly to an emergency room where they began treating my injuries. I had to continue pretending to be unconscious, but I also needed to find a way to communicate with someone I could trust. "Doctor," I heard a nurse say. "Her vital signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than we would expect for someone in her supposed condition." My heart leaped. I'd been found out. I was such a bad actress that my own body was betraying me. "It happens sometimes in cases of extreme trauma," the doctor replied. "The body has mysterious ways of clinging to life. We're going to maintain strict control." "The next few hours will be crucial?" "Nah." Alejandra made a sound that was supposed to be a sob of pain, but to me, it sounded like a sigh of relief. "Can we see them?" Manuel asked. "Just for a few minutes. We need to say goodbye in case something happens." The doctor nodded, and soon I heard footsteps approaching my bed. It was the most dangerous moment of all. I had to convince my assassins that I was truly dying. I felt Alejandra's presence at my bedside. His hand touched mine, and all I could do was keep from pulling my hand away immediately. "Mom," he whispered, "if you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I'm so sorry this happened." Her words were poisoned, honey-sweet on the surface, but deadly in their essence. Manuel approached from the other side. "Ana, my dear," he murmured, "you've been like a mother to me. We will never forget you." "Lie!" The only reason they wouldn't forget me was because they would have to live with the knowledge that I had been murdered. But then Alejandra leaned closer to my ear and whispered something that chilled my blood. "I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom. You never should have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like Ricardo." At that moment, I knew our plan had worked. Alejandra had just confessed, and although I had no way to record, there was a nurse in the room who had heard every word. Alejandra's whisper echoed in my ears like a direct confession of her guilt. She had mentioned Ricardo. She had admitted that some truths must remain buried, and most importantly, he had admitted that our financial questions had been the reason for our accident. But I needed more than that. I needed a full confession that couldn't be misinterpreted or denied later. The nurse who'd heard the comment, a young woman named Maria, according to her ID, had stopped checking the monitors. I saw through my half-closed eyelids, her eyes widen in shock and horror. She'd heard something she shouldn't have, and her expression told me she understood the implications of those words perfectly. "What did you say about Ricardo?" Manuel whispered, obviously surprised by the mention of his dead brother. Alejandra tensed, realizing she'd said too much. "Nothing," she murmured. "I just meant—" "Well, Mom always wondered what really happened that night." "I don't think it matters anymore," Manuel replied, but his voice was thick with tension. But it did matter, and Manuel was smart enough to realize his wife had made a mistake. "Alejandra," he said in a tense voice, "let's go. The doctors need space to work." I could feel the tension between them, the mutual realization that they had said too much in the wrong place. After they left, Nurse Maria approached my bed. "Ma'am," she whispered so softly I could barely hear her. "I know you can hear me. What I just heard isn't normal. If you're in danger, you need to tell me somehow. Her voice held an urgency that filled me with hope. Someone else had begun to suspect. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, I moved my index finger. It was the smallest possible movement, but Maria noticed it immediately. "My God," he whispered. "She's pretending to be unconscious." I moved my finger again, this time twice. "Listen," he said, leaning even closer. "I'm going to pretend I'm checking your monitors. If you're in danger from those people who just left, move your finger 3 times. Without hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times. Maria gasped. "They did this to you." 3 more movements. The nurse stepped away from my bed and pretended to check my IV while she processed what she'd just discovered. I could see from her expression that she was struggling with the decision of what to do. Finally, she approached me again. "I'm going to talk to the attending physician," she whispered. "But I need you to keep pretending until we can protect her. Do you understand?" I moved my finger once. The next few minutes were agonizing. Maria left the room, and I was left alone, hoping and praying that she would believe my story and take the right action. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Maria, accompanied by an older woman who must have been the head physician, and surprisingly, 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said in a low voice. "Nurse Maria told me about her situation. If you can hear me, we need you to know that you are safe now. The police are here to protect you." A wave of relief so intense it almost broke my performance. "Can you open your eyes?" one of the officers asked. Slowly, very slowly, I opened my eyes. The hospital light blinded me for a moment, but gradually I was able to focus on the worried faces around me. "Thank God," Maria murmured. I thought I was going crazy. "Ma'am," said the police officer, a middle-aged man with a serious expression. "I'm Detective Martinez. We understand you may be in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain?" My voice came out as a hoarse whisper after hours of pretending to be unconscious. My daughter and her husband pushed us. The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, recordings, and revelations. I told Detective Martinez everything I knew: Ricardo's death, Alejandra's robberies, the pressure to change our will, and finally, the plan to kill us on the mountain. But the most important thing was the recording on Jorge's phone. "Does your husband have recorded evidence?" the detective asked, his eyes shining. "Yes," I replied. "It's all on his phone. The confessions, the plans, everything." The detective immediately went to the room where Jorge was being treated. Jorge had regained consciousness shortly after me, and when the detective explained the situation to him, he handed over his phone without hesitation. "Here it is," he said in a weak but firm voice. 20 years of lies and the truth about what happened today." While police technicians analyzed the recording, Alejandra and Manuel remained in the waiting room, playing their part as devastated family members to other hospital visitors. They had no idea that their careful performance was about to end forever. "The recording is clear," the detective announced after an hour. "We have explicit confessions to Ricardo's murder, admissions about stealing money, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder against both of you. It's more than enough to arrest them." "But are they going to arrest them here?" I asked, worried for our safety. "If they realize we're alive and talking." The detective nodded, understanding my concern. "We already have officers in position. As soon as we have the signed arrest warrant, we'll arrest them. Meanwhile, you two are under police protection." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Alejandra and Manuel were down there, probably talking with other patients' families, receiving condolences for our deaths, planning how to deal with our funeral and inheritance. They had no idea that in the hospital rooms upstairs, we were dismantling their carefully constructed world of lies. "Is there anything else?" I asked, sensing something still bothering me. The detective took a folder of papers. "After hearing your story, we conducted a preliminary investigation into your daughter's finances. Not only is she bankrupt as you suspected, but she also owes money to some very dangerous people, loan sharks who won't accept excuses." My blood ran cold. "You mean we weren't just inconveniences to her?" "You and your husband were her only salvation," he confirmed. "With your inheritance, she could pay off her debts and start over. Without you, she'd probably be dead in a few weeks." That revelation added a new dimension to the betrayal. She didn't see us just as obstacles. She saw us as her financial salvation. Our death wasn't just convenient for her. It was absolutely necessary for her survival. "And what will happen to our grandchildren?" I asked, feeling a new wave of pain at the thought of Alejandra and Manuel's innocent children. "Social services will take temporary custody of them," the detective replied kindly. "But from what I understand, you could file for guardianship as soon as you recover from your injuries." The thought of raising the children of our own killers was overwhelming, but it was also the only way to ensure something good would come out of this nightmare. Those children were innocent and deserved a chance to grow up in a home where love was real, not fake. "It's time," the detective announced as a police officer entered the room, papers in hand. "The warrants are signed. Let's arrest them now." Through my bedroom window overlooking the hospital lobby, I could see the police discreetly taking up positions. The moment I'd been waiting for 20 years had finally arrived. Alejandra and Manuel heard the firm voice of the police officer in charge. "You're under arrest for the murder of Ricardo and the attempted murder of Ana and Jorge." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Alejandra's hysterical voice. "What are you talking about? We're the victims here." "Our parents died in an accident." "Ma'am?" The police officer replied calmly. "Your parents are alive and have provided complete evidence of their crimes." There was a moment of absolute silence, followed by a cry of despair from Manuel. "That's impossible. We saw them die. They were dead." Her involuntary confession was captured on police tape recorders, adding another piece of evidence to the case. On the radio, she heard Alejandra begin to blame Manuel. "It was all his idea. I didn't want to do any of this. He made me." And Manuel, in his desperation, screamed, "You were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned this from the beginning." In a matter of minutes, the alliance that had lasted for years crumbled as each tried to save their own skin. Detective Martinez returned to my room an hour later with an expression of satisfaction mixed with sadness. "You're under arrest and on your way to the station," he reported. "You're both trying to blame each other, which only strengthens our case." "But there's something else I need to tell you." "What else?" I asked, though I wasn't sure my heart could handle any more revelations. "During the arrest, we found this in your daughter's purse," she said, showing me a small digital recorder. "Apparently, she'd been recording conversations with you and your husband over the past few weeks, probably looking for evidence that you suspected something." My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" The detective sighed. "It means she knew you were beginning to uncover the truth." The trip to the mountains wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a direct response to her suspicions. In one of the recordings, you can clearly hear Manuel telling her, "We need to act quickly before they go to the police." The depth of the planning and the coldness of the calculation took my breath away. They hadn't just planned to kill us. They had been monitoring our conversations, assessing the level of danger we posed to them. We were mice in a maze, and they had been the scientists watching our every move. There's one more thing, the detective continued, that we discovered in the investigation of your finances. Your daughter not only owed money to dangerous loan sharks, but she had also forged your signature on several documents, trying to access your bank accounts. If you had died in that ravine, she would have had immediate access to all your resources. Each new revelation was like another stab in the back. My own daughter hadn't just been plotting to kill me. She'd been actively stealing from me, forging my signature, and violating every principle of family trust I'd tried to instill in her. How much money did she steal in total? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. About 180,000 Mexican pesos in the last 3 years, the detective replied. Small amounts she thought you wouldn't notice, but when added together, they total a significant sum. The money Jorge and I had saved over decades of hard work, penny by penny, had financed our daughter's luxurious life while she plotted our murder. The following days at the hospital were a whirlwind of police interviews, lawyer visits, and calls from media outlets that had picked up the story. The local press had titled the case the most horrific family betrayal of the decade, and reporters from across the country wanted to hear our side of the story. My sister Sophia arrived from Guadalajara crying and hugging me as if she hadn't seen me in decades. Ana told me this several times. I always knew there was something strange about Alejandra after Ricardo's death, but I never imagined she was capable of this. Her words comforted me because they confirmed that my maternal instincts hadn't been completely blind. And the children, I asked about my grandchildren who were now in the temporary care of social services. I visited them yesterday, Sophia replied sadly. They're confused, wondering why their parents can't come home. They're too young to understand what really happened. The lawyer we hired, Dr. Elena, a competent and compassionate woman, came to hear about the legal process. The case is solid, he assured us. With the recordings, the confessions during the arrest, and all the financial evidence, it's almost impossible for them to escape significant convictions. But then he added something that chilled me to the bone. However, they're trying to negotiate a lesser plea, claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditated. A crime of passion, I exclaimed indignantly. They planned this for weeks, bought special equipment, and chose the perfect location. Dr. Elena nodded gravely. I know, and we have evidence of premeditation, but your lawyers are going to argue that it was a desperate decision made under extreme financial pressure. The idea that you could receive reduced sentences for your crimes filled me with fury. They had killed Ricardo. They had tried to murder us. They had stolen our money for years, and now they wanted to present themselves as victims of circumstance. What can we do to make sure they get what they deserve? I asked. Testify, Dr. Elena responded simply. Your testimony combined with all the evidence will be crucial for the jury to understand the true nature of these crimes. But I warn you, it will be emotionally devastating to face your daughter in court. She was right. The idea of looking Alejandra in the eye during the trial, of hearing her lawyers try to justify the unjustifiable, of publicly reliving every moment of this nightmare, was overwhelming. But it was what I had to do for Ricardo, for us, and for my grandchildren who deserved to know the truth about their parents. 3 weeks after the arrest, Jorge and I were finally able to go home. Our wounds had healed enough to allow us to move around, although he still needed crutches, and I had my arm in a sling. The house felt strange, as if it were the set of a play after all the actors had left. Everything was exactly as we had left it the day of our family outing. The breakfast dishes were still in the sink. The bed was unmade. The flowers Alejandra had brought me that week were still on the living room table, now wilted and dead. It was as if time had stopped at the moment our normal lives ended forever. Do you think we'll ever be happy again? I asked Jorge that first night back as we lay in our family bed. He hugged me with his uninjured arm and sighed deeply. I don't know, Ana, he said, but we're alive. We have the truth on our side, and for the first time in 20 years, we don't have to live with secrets. The trial began 6 months later. The day I was scheduled to testify, I looked Alejandra directly in the eyes for the first time since the arrest. I saw no remorse or pain. I didn't see the daughter I had raised. I saw a cold, calculating stranger who had disguised herself as my daughter for decades. When I finished my testimony, after recounting every horrific detail of our experience, I addressed her directly from the witness stand. Alejandra, I don't know who you are, but you're no longer my daughter. My daughter died the night you killed Ricardo, and what has lived in her place for 20 years is a monster that I unknowingly helped create. The jury deliberated for 2 days before finding Alejandra guilty of intentional homicide for Ricardo's death and of attempted aggravated homicide for what she did to us. Manuel received the same sentence as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole. Now, a year later, Jorge and I have begun the formal adoption process for our grandchildren. They are beautiful, innocent children who deserve a chance to grow up knowing what true love is, not the manipulative and toxic love they received from their biological parents. Every night, when I put them to bed, I tell them stories about Uncle Ricardo, the uncle they never knew. I tell them about his kindness, his honesty, his dream of being an architect and building houses for happy families. I tell them how brave he was and how he tried to protect those he loved even when it put him in danger. I don't tell them about the betrayal, the fall, the impact that took his life. They're too young to bear that burden. Maybe one day when they're older, I'll tell them the whole truth. But for now, I want them to grow up without the weight of their parents' grim legacy. I still wake up at night, sometimes sweating and screaming, reliving the moment of the fall. Jorge also has nightmares. We hug each other in the dark, reminding each other that we're alive, that we survived, that the truth has finally come out. We decided to sell the house. There are so many memories here, both good and bad. We bought a smaller house closer to the beach where the constant sound of the waves helps us sleep better. A new house for a new beginning. The scar on my shoulder still hurts when the weather changes. Jorge's knee never fully recovered. These are the physical scars we carry. The emotional ones are much deeper. Sometimes I find myself looking at old family photos. Alejandra smiling on her 10th birthday. Ricardo teaching him how to ride a bike. The 4 of them together at a picnic on the beach. I try to understand how something so beautiful could transform into something so monstrous. How could I have missed the signs, the small moments that might have alerted me to what was coming? But then I remind myself that love can blind us. That sometimes we don't want to see the truth because it hurts too much. That we trust those we love even when we should question them. I never visited Alejandra in prison. I can't bring myself to look into the eyes of the woman who killed my son and tried to kill me. Jorge went once, but returned more silent than ever. He said only that she showed no remorse, only anger at having been caught. Manuel wrote letters apologizing, saying he was under Alejandra's influence, that he wasn't himself. We didn't respond. Some betrayals are too great to be forgiven. Years will pass. Our grandchildren will grow up. The pain may lessen a little, but the truth will remain. The truth about how greed can corrupt even the most sacred family bonds. About how silence can protect monsters. About how sometimes we need to pretend to be dead to finally live in truth. Sometimes, when I walk along the beach with Jorge by my side and our grandchildren running ahead, I feel an unexpected peace. It's not the happiness we knew before. It's something different, something deeper. A sense that we survived the worst life could throw at us and still found reasons to smile. And somewhere maybe Ricardo is watching all this, seeing that his death wasn't in vain. That the truth, even after 20 years, finally came out. That those who loved him survived to tell their story. And that ultimately is a form of justice. Now, if you liked this story, click on this next video that's appearing on the screen because it tells a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before.